down there, but recording. Okay.
I just thought we would start.
Yeah, so yeah, but that it makes the horn out of tune and it makes it impossible to play the low notes. But for stuff like this, it's like, okay, no judgments out there, like whatever. I'm not gonna and then playing that softly and with that, all right, I'll call it wimpy of a sound, like Phil Woods used to yell and say, if you want delicacy, play the flute. He would say, if you weren't like letting it loose and really giving it your all there on the horn, that's what he would say. If you want delicacy, play the flute. So it's like, okay.
So
anyway.
Gentlemen, we are on episode number 50 of the Growing Band Director podcast.
Ooh.
What do you call that? Is that what's the half centennial?
Yeah.
What's that called?
I don't know.
Golden something, the golden edition of the podcast.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't like 50th anniversary like golden? Is it right? Is that what it is?
Could be.
5 is silver.
Let's use that.
We used the golden anniversary. There you go.
I'm improvising. What can I tell you?
That's right. So what a segue. This is all about beginning improvisation because when Jeff and I met, Jeff, we've known each other for 5 years now. And right? 5 years? Sounds right.
5 or 6.
And you started telling me, yeah, there's this guy in Connecticut, John Mastroianni, and he can teach anybody to improvise, right? We've actually had a lot of improvisation, I guess I would say, jazz podcasts recently, and there's more coming up here. We're kind of in the season, getting ready for jazz season, if you will, even though in my books, every season should be jazz season.
There you go.
So today is going to be all about beginning improvisers, getting students to improvise, especially for people who are not improvisers themselves, right? So John, welcome back. If people have not seen you from a couple, 6 weeks ago or so when we were together, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, thanks guys for having me back. It was great fun the first time, and I hope it's equally rewarding and as fun this time. So I'm currently assistant professor in residence of jazz studies at the University of Connecticut, and I'm the associate department head for undergraduate studies. So among other things, I teach jazz saxophone at UCONN. I direct the big band, the top big band at UCONN. I teach jazz history and some other stuff too in the music education program. I was a 36-year high school band director. So my entire public school life was teaching high school. So, Jeff Smith right here was my mentor, and I student taught with Jeff. And I will not tell you the year, but in any event, that's kind of what got me going and got me started. And here I am, so I'm a beginning teacher for the 41st time now. So it's really enjoying every moment. And I'm also a freelance jazz saxophonist as well as a woodwind doubler. And so I've got the best of all worlds. I get to hang out every day with all these amazing young ladies and gentlemen who are my students. And then, I get to go out and play gigs and shows and whatever else. So at night, on the weekends, whenever they come along. So it's I feel very blessed in every regard. That's for sure.
So when we're talking about beginning improvisation, what are types of tunes and types of forms that we should be starting kids on?
Okay. So I'm going to back up for a minute before I even get into tunes or forms or anything like that. And certainly, the blues will come to mind, and these kind of things they'll pop up as we continue conversing this evening. But I think with beginning improvisation, first of all, I'm a great believer that, remember, so many of the great improvisers in this music was passed down by an oral tradition. Music, people learned how to play by ear. So if you think of like Charlie Parker going to play and sitting up in the rafters and watching Lester Young play the saxophone, and he'd have his alto and he'd be fingering and try to copy what Lester was doing and that type of stuff. And when you think about that, I mean, and most of the greatest players, you can trace a tremendous development of their ear and lots of transcribing and those kind of things. So one of the things I like to do with really young people. And although I've been a high school band director all my life, and now college, of course, I have been asked on numerous occasions, hey, can you come in and help us and help us do some improvising and that type of stuff. So what I always did first is you take the known quantity. So for instance, if you go to an elementary school kid, and literally you can start improvising with a kid as long as they can play even something as simple as a B flat scale. You can do it. You can start to get into play. So what I like to do to break the ice, if you will.
Can you get them to improvise if they can play a 5-note scale?
Sure, absolutely.
Yep.
So
they don't need to know the whole scale.
No, they don't even need to know
part of
the
it.
whole. I mean, I could get them to improvise if they know one note.
Yep.
And and I'm gonna do some of that, this evening. But if I ask a kid to play a scale, right? So and again, tell me if this is too loud. I've got the proverbial sock in my horn for all
Put
the
a sock in it. Yep.
for all the listeners out there. I didn't even blow a note, and these guys told me to put a sock in it. So, but if I ask a kid to play a B flat concert scale, right, which is probably one of the first keys they're going to learn in school, I would imagine. So they're just going to go some version of. They're just going to be really straight up. Is that a good volume? Not too loud? That's okay.
Sure.
All right. But see, then I say, now I'm going to play a B flat major scale. I might do something like. So then, of course, I'll ask them, well, what's the difference between my scale and your scale? Well, in the general sense, I think we'd all agree, mine was a little more creative. I mean, I did a whole mess of stuff. I played some long notes. I moved from note to note a little quickly in some occasions. When I got to the leading tone, I scooped it. And because jazz is a music that's highly stylized, so already in that very little simple exercise, I already showed them, like, wow, you can be pretty creative with just a scale. So now if I ask a student, okay, a 5-note scale, right, probably often referred to as the pentatonic scale, but even if it was the first 5 notes of the major scale, it wasn't a pentatonic scale, that's okay too. So now when they play it, they'll get more creative back when they'll start to spit some ideas back, and it won't be simply playing up the scale up and down. If I do it to a high school kid, they'll go right, so they'll learn it like maybe the all-state way or the regional way, like that. But and a little kid is not going to do that, like a very beginner. So with very beginners, you notice I haven't said a thing about chords, I haven't said a thing about form or anything like that. And you say, let's be creative. Let's try to break the creative juices and or I should say, break the mold kind of, and get the creative juices flowing. Then I might play really simple things. So no tunes, nothing. So I'm going to say, all right, so we know the first 5 notes of that scale. So I'm going to play and you repeat. So I might go, let the student repeat. Okay. Let the student repeat. Right, etc. So I might play these really, really simple patterns, and depending on the level, if they were really ranked beginners, I would say I'm always going to start on a concert B flat. And then, of course, I would stray farther away as I got along just to see if their ear would follow what I do. And I always, again, I said before, jazz is a highly stylized music. So in addition to playing those simple patterns, I'll do things like I'll play a note and I'll go, or something like that. And invariably, someone will raise their hand and say, well, why do you do that? Well, if you listen to jazz players play, right, they add their own personality to the music. It's not necessarily as pure sometimes as you would think in terms of tone quality and those type of things. Even though we want to keep a good warm sound, we do things to the note. We fall off of them, we scoop into them, we do things. So I try to add all of those things almost from the word go, so they're experiencing the fact that this music is pretty stylized. And I find that it's a good icebreaker. It's within their comfort zone. It's, you're only playing those 5 notes, whatever they're used to doing. Again, we're not talking about form. I'm not telling them anything about scales or anything like that. We're just playing. We're just having a good time. We're just doing call and response and playing by ear and that type of thing. And I think that's a really good icebreaker for the youngins.
And you started tapping into it a little bit. The main reason we want students to improvise is so they can, what is it? They can express their soul, their emotions, their feelings. Now we can express those things through written music too, but the
Sure.
minute they're starting to improvise, they're now developing as people. They
Right.
have a voice
Right.
and they get to, give of themselves, speak from their soul, all those things.
Right.
And how often are kids, I mean, if I think away from music, if you ask kids to have an opinion on something, so many kids can't even have an opinion. They're just like, there. What do you think? Well, I don't know. Well,
Exactly.
this is forcing them to think and have an opinion. So this improvisation thing is really, really big as we're trying to create just better thinkers and people who are more
Sure.
healthy emotionally.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think this is really important. I'm sorry, Jeff, you look like you're ready to ask a question, but I want to
Go
make
ahead.
this quick point. It's very important to set up a non-threatening environment in your classroom when you're doing this. Okay. And now I'll speak to band directors K-12. When I was at Hall High School and we had all these great players and all these great improvisers, but we had improv class once a week because we met 5 days a week. I know people don't have that luxury in their jazz ensembles in school. But do you know that kids who were not really, really good improvisers and were not that experienced by the time even they got to high school, they didn't want to know anything about trying to improvise. So because there's like, I'm never going to play like Jeff. Why even try? I'm not going to get to his level, so I'm not even going to try. So you have to set up it's super critically important that you set up a non-threatening environment in your classroom where everyone feels like they can express themselves and they feel safe. It doesn't matter what I play. And I always had it where we all commented on each other's solos. And you'd set up the ground rules. Constructive criticism is great. Okay. Can't be all negative. There has to be some of both in there. And if you say something negative, you say it in a nice, constructive way so that we can all learn from it and move forward from there. So I think that's really important. I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, that's all right, John, because that's what I was going to point out. When John used to teach in Stanford in the summers, summer camp for jazz improvisation, and I'd send as many of my kids to that camp because high school kids get blocks and animosities of fears about going and playing and improvising. And I could get them to a point, but I needed somebody who was a great improviser to take them to the next level. And that's what John did. And the kids would come back and say, can't we just do call and response like John does? And I said, sure we can. And then we pick a scale and we do it. And I think that it's important for our listeners to understand that what John's saying not only works for the little tots, but it works for the adults and the high school kids and the college kids who have never improvised, because they're all going to say, like you just said a minute ago, I can't do that.
Yeah. Right. There's no doubt about it. And speaking to maybe the older students for a while, or if there's some high school band directors listening, there's some college band directors. So let's take something hipper. All right, let's take something more advanced. So maybe you have some advanced students. So you ask them to play, okay, well, how about if you play a Lydian dominant scale? Don't worry if you don't know what that is. It doesn't even matter because I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go. Okay, so I'm going to play that scale, but that's kind of boring. Now, what am I going to do with it? All right, I can do the obvious. Right, so I can start playing in thirds, but how about getting really, really creative with it and try to come up with some maybe melodic things or some ideas that are going to sound just not like a scale? So those, I'm just jumping up and down the horn, but I'm not playing like notes in succession, or I'm trying to find sounds.
Ooh,
some things that are
do you call
set.
that? I mean, that's not. Well, I wouldn't call that free improvisation because you're thinking about certain things, but you're not thinking about time really. You're just
Right? No, I'm
coming
not.
up with ideas.
Yeah, I'm just yeah. So I'm just playing whatever comes to mind. I don't want to be restricted. I'm not thinking of any restrictions whatsoever. In fact, what I do, I love to practice like this. Okay, and it's very important to have some piano skills. Okay, and I wish I was sitting next to. I'm sitting next to my MIDI piano, but not one that I can turn on. But it's really important to have some piano skills. All you need is a root, a third, and a seventh to make the sonority of a chord. All right. And I won't get into that, why that's really important. Right. But if you do that, so if the chord I was saying was, or scale I was playing was a Lydian dominant, so it's a dominant seventh chord. So concert key, all I would need would be the A flat, the C, and the G flat. If I had those three notes, it would tell me the chord quality and it would give it to me. So I hit those three notes and I hold the pedal down on the piano. And then I sit with my horn and I just go, and there I go. I'm just playing, and some things are gonna come to mind, and they're gonna come to your ear, and then all of a sudden it's like, ooh, I could probably use that when I'm playing. So I really love that device, and that works for anybody too. I could go to a young student who only knows five notes, and play even a B flat major triad the piano, and say, go ahead, play whatever comes to your mind. No time, no tempo, no restrictions, as I said earlier. And I think again, you're breaking the ice now. You're not finding them, putting them into a box, and making them do something. They almost have to be successful right from the word go. And then if you can do that, you got them hooked.
Yeah, and the value of group improvisation is huge because the kids are not feeling isolated.
Right, exactly. They all know that everyone's going to play. And they all know that they're going to get to talk about everyone else. That's just the environment that you set up in your classroom. And remember, when students take charge of their own learning, it's always a beautiful thing. And you know what? You'll find that you hardly have to say anything, because they're going to make all the good points themselves. It's amazing. Now you're also teaching them to be good listeners. They're going to say, well, John played too many notes. Wow, Kyle, he played some really cool rhythms in his solo. All right, Jeff, he did. They're going to come out with all of this stuff. It's amazing how astute they are at listening. I'm always amazed. And even at the real young age, at like fourth grade, fifth grade, that's the time to get them. And we all know what happens in middle school. Then they get really self-conscious about everything, right? Their appearance, like the whole 9 yards. Those are the really dangerous years. So if you can get them going before that time and they've already started to play, you can really develop some wonderful players. So it's really crucial that it happens, I think, at that young age, if you can.
Hey, so what's next? What's the next step?
So for teachers, I just want to throw one out there for teachers. A lot of teachers will raise their hand and say, oh, I'm not comfortable. I can't improvise. So how can I teach a kid to improvise? Well, yes, you can. You can teach a kid to improvise, because if you can play some of those very simple patterns. And Kyle, may I put something up on the screen? Would that be okay if you give me shared, screen sharing privileges, and I put something on the screen?
Yeah, I didn't plan for that.
Oh,
is it,
sorry.
Is it the document you sent me?
Yeah, it's the document. Yeah, you could even put it up if
I can share
or if you can't, it's no big deal.
I can share it. Here you go.
Oh yeah, perfect. Okay.
How's that?
Yeah, that's perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. So there's a little simple thing.
And if you can't see this, you got to check it out on YouTube. That's where you can see it.
Okay. That's fine too. Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry to pull a fast one on you, but
that's all good.
So this is something that's very, very simple. And I've been asked on a number of occasions, and I did this sheet because the school district asked me to come in, and they said, can you be our guest and all that kind of stuff. And we need you to do an improvisation workshop, but it has to cover rank beginners to some people who actually can play a couple simple 2/5 lines. So immediately I was like, whoa, well, that's a tall order. So, okay. So I was trying to make it interesting for everybody all at once and not lose the older kids or not lose the younger ones. So I developed this little thing, and there were some teachers there that really were not, they were novices in improvisation and they really didn't have experience teaching it. So I took a blues progression. So I guess, Kyle, this maybe now gravitates toward your initial question. What form do
Yeah.
we start? So blues obviously is one of the most basic and earliest forms of jazz. So it's a great place to start. And if you scroll farther down the sheet, you don't have to do it now, but the blues progression is there on the second page. So I had everybody look at it and say, okay, let's have everyone play the roots.
And for anybody who wants this document as well, if you're a Patreon member, you have access to it in the folder.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Okay. So if I just went through the blues, I'm just going to do this super fast. I just make up a rhythm and go, etc. Now I'm going to go through all of the chords and I'm going to play just the roots. And then you can see it kind of develops as it goes from there. Then I take the first three notes, etc. Then you go to the four chord and etc. Now the next one, the one labeled C, I really like because jazz is a music that's always moving forward. When you hear people counting off jazz ensembles, I hope you don't hear 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh boy. Already that's not going to swing, right? So when you hear someone count off a jazz band, it's always 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, right? It's something like that. Oh, you notice how we're always moving forward to the next beat. So what I did is I took that little 3-note pattern and I just anticipated it. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 3. So it's a cool little pattern, and it actually lands on the third of the chord, which is another wonderful thing. But again,
and getting kids to start phrases off the beat, right away. That's great.
Yep. Yeah. There's an amazing piano player, Hal Galper, who's a great educator. And he does this thing. He never teaches a scale. Like if they're going to learn even a major scale, he'll go 1, 2, 3. You see? So I actually started the scale on the and of 4 just to get that other motion. And of course, you can start on a different note if you want, but in any event. So these are simple little things. And I loved it because there were some like classical flute players there. There was actually one person who was a violinist. They had no trouble whatsoever like doing this because all you're doing is looking, it says B flat. Okay, I'm playing a B flat, and you're relating everything, scales and chords and that type of thing. And it worked really, really, really well. And there were all these patterns and everybody was able to play them really easily. And then it just gets more and more complicated as it goes along, and as if you flip to the second page. But
well, let's just for people who are seeing it and are not seeing it. After that, you go to the chord tones, the skipping 1, 3, and 5,
right. Okay,
and then you add 1, 3, 5, 7.
Yeah, exactly. So and then you start adding different permutations of each, like depending on how advanced you are. So if I play, okay, so then maybe the next time you go, right? Maybe the next time you go, and maybe you go. Now, obviously, I could stay here all night and just keep playing like different patterns, but the more they're able to articulate and manipulate, all of a sudden, now you can say to the student, so use those patterns in your solo. Like try to use some of those patterns. Now you have some vocabulary, right? It's just like if I say mama, like you're talking to a little kid, right? Trying to teach him how to talk, mama, dada, all that kind of good stuff. Well, jazz is a language too, right? So jazz, we just learn a different vocabulary, etc. Right? We learn a little thing and we take it through a bunch of different keys and etc. But that's vocabulary. That's jazz.
And you hit on the importance of listening. There's a great teacher, I'm not going to say his name, who's retired now, but he's this legendary jazz teacher. And he would go to a clinic and he'd hear kids improvise, and he'd say, and somebody would ask him, how do I learn how to improvise? And he would say, do you listen to jazz? Well, no. Well, do that and walk away. That was it. Like if you're not listening to jazz, you can't do it because you need to hear the language before you can play the language.
Right. There's no question about it. You know, and I always ask that question too. And I said, I'm not being facetious. How many people listen to jazz? And you'd be surprised how few hands go up because let's face it, it's not what 3% of the American population, buys jazz music or listens to jazz music. So, you're fighting an uphill battle in that regard. But yes, they have to listen. And again, all right, we finally started maybe looking at some music right now, but I do want to make the point that like nothing, we're using our ear for everything at the moment, right? So if it was high school and I had a chart on C Jam blues or something like that, and that you could use even for elementary school, right? But learn the melody by ear before you do anything. You learn the melody by ear. And even for a standard that has a few more notes in it, it could be like Sunny Moon for Two, which is the same phrase over and over again. Some tunes like that, where they're kind of pretty easy for kids to pick up. There you go. So you start to have them learn it by ear, and all of a sudden they're kind of catching the basis of improvisation. And there's your blues progression right there that you just scrolled to on the top of page 2. So yeah, there it is for anybody, and everybody realizes out there are literally so many variations of the blues. It's
Yep.
unbelievable. So I just chose to write the 2/5 in the last 4 bars so that I could illustrate that to some more of the advanced players and all that. But for little like students in 4th grade, 5th grade, you can literally go 5-4-1 in the last couple bars, or however you want to do it.
I've been doing more and more for kids who are new improvisers. I just go 5-5-1. So
Yeah, you can do
it's
that
the
too.
1, the 4, and the 5, and that's
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It makes it really simple. Sure, that's a great idea as well. It's whatever works for you. Ultimately, all of you out there are the experts in that your students, where they are, if they're really just beginning, if they can manipulate some of this stuff, okay. But literally, I have never experienced anyone who, at least if they can play 5 notes or a major scale, that isn't able to start improvising a little bit by this method, by just using your ear and all that. And I love to use this example. There's where my son went to elementary school. His teacher was a classical flute player, not really a jazz improviser at all. So she seeked me out. She obviously knew like I was Nick's dad and whatever, and I was a jazz player and all that kind of stuff. And she said, I really want to start a jazz band. I want to start a 4th and 5th grade jazz band. And can you help me? Can you help me with some like repertoire? Can you help me with like teaching them how to improvise and all that? So a long story short, at the concert, kids were parading up in front of the band, playing in a microphone, improvising with no music, just blowing, like either on like a pentatonic scale or like a bluesy type of thing or something like that. And she was the one who initiated it. She took, her flute and also again for obviously you teachers out there, show the kids that you're vulnerable too.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, even at the college level. I did it today in a lesson with the kid. I was trying to show him something with some patterns. I'm like, okay, wow, this is hard. I said, let me see if I can do this. And I played a few, and then I got tied up, and all. We're human, we're human too, and we need to practice too. So if you show them that you are taking a risk, and it's okay to take a risk because no risk, no reward, right? So if you show them that, you're going to be surprised. That's also going to create a really safe space in your classroom to do all that stuff. So I'm really a firm believer in that. And like I said, I've never seen it not happen. Sorry for the double negative, but
I think you brought a really good point. And early in my career, we'd
Jeff,
go
can
to
you
jazz
stop playing
festivals.
can you stop playing with your microphone like rattling? Thank you.
Sorry. Okay. Apologize. When we'd go to jazz festivals, we'd have the clinicians come up after we play, and they'd say, well, who's your favorite jazz artist? And when I was beginning teaching, maybe 1 or 2 kids could say who they liked. And I learned from that I needed to get them to listen. And to get them to listen, there had to be some mechanism to do it. So what I used to do is in marching band season, before school started, I'd have DVDs playing up in the front of the room. But when marching band season was over, then I'd start putting DVDs of different jazz artists playing up in the front of the room.
yes.
Yep, that's a great idea.
Yeah. it's definitely a fantastic idea. And I used to do it all the time too.
And name a tune. And I said, I don't want to hear about the rapper you're listening or anything like that. I want to hear who you're listening to.
Yeah.
And I think we have to, as teachers, even if we don't do jazz ensemble, we need to make sure the kids do listen to jazz because of its pure nature of being American music.
Sure. Right. It is our music. I had a really great friend, still my great friend, but lived in Australia. And you know, and we recorded together and all that. And he's back there now, and I miss him dearly all the time. But he used to, like, people used to ask him questions. They say, what do you find is the biggest difference between jazz in Australia and jazz in America? And he said, I find it hard to believe that the country it was born in listens to it the least, because it's revered in Europe, of course, and other countries and all that. But here we are in the country that it was developed, and it seems like we appreciate it the least. But that's the old adage. Sometimes what's right in front of your face is you're not really like, oh yeah, I can hear that every day, or I can. But so it's up to guys like us to keep the flame burning.
Well, there's one of my kids you taught years ago, Miles. You'll probably remember Miles from years ago. Miles is in China now. And I see Miles maybe once a year. And Miles says how people are just starving for jazz in China.
Yeah.
He plays every night of the week. He said different club every night, depends on who I'm playing with. He said, but recordings, all that stuff, they're starving. And
sure,
people here don't listen to it enough.
Yeah, it's true. I was only in Europe twice to play as a jazz musician. I was in Europe twice playing, and I mean, it was like I was some big superstar or something. Like I got flocked by all these people. Oh, what? And who am I? I'm nobody. I'm not Joe Lovano. I'm not Joe Henderson. I'm not, Roy Hargrove. But just we were an American big band over there playing and all that, and they were all over us like we were. It was just, it's unbelievable. It's a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing.
So at the bottom of that handout that was on the video, you have the following are crucial steps to becoming a good jazz improviser. Number one was imitate. Find a hero on your instrument and imitate them. Copy their sound, their phrasing, their licks, etc. And then the Clark Terry quote, imitate, assimilate, and innovate.
Yeah, one of my favorites. And really, this is a more advanced concept, but one of the best assignments a teacher ever gave me, this is Dick Oates, who plays lead in the Vanguard Jazz Orchestra, and is still one of my heroes, but he made me study a different saxophone player every month. So I'd go to his apartment, on the Upper West Side, and we would sit and he'd turn on a Sonny Stitt record, and then we would try to play and all that stuff. And then he'd give me a tune and he'd say, okay, now write me a solo in the style of Sonny Stitt, and then come back next week and play like Sonny Stitt. And then the next month, it might be Johnny Hodges. So, and I learned all these styles and I took them all in, and I really, so especially like, who wants to play like this these days? No one plays like this. Who plays with that wide, fast vibrato like Jack? No one. But he made me learn that style, and it's been incredibly valuable to me throughout my musical career, because depending on the kind of work that you do, and I'm lucky enough to do a lot of different kinds of work, and I'm called upon to play a lot of different kinds of style. If I'm playing the show Chicago and it says a la Hodges, I'm all doing. Yeah, I mean, I can't sound like Johnny Hodges, but I could fake it, where I would make the conductor really happy. So
that was the great Rockabye River, right?
Yes. Oh man, goodness, a lot of people know that tune.
Well,
and of course,
we did that a couple years ago. Yeah,
Duke Ellington's favorite key, like D flat. Yeah. So
I had a memory of that. We did that at a festival. My lead player was like deathly ill, so I had to like do it without a lead player. It was like, come on. But my alto player was really good that year.
Yeah. Well,
one thing I did today in an improv class that I'll leave you with as well, that I didn't plan on being a long experience, but was really good for them. We're working on the tune Blues Walk, but not the Lou Donaldson tune, the Clifford Brown tune. And they learned it really well. So then I had the whole class go to the board, and as a group activity, could the 6 of them write it down?
Yeah.
and the amount of discussions they had and how long it took them to get it, but they got it as a group.
Yeah.
You know, some of that was like kind of a basic transcribing exercise.
Sure.
I don't do that very much, but because sometimes it just takes a really long time to do that. But
Sure.
that was great. That was today.
Yeah, no, that's all. Well, good for you. That's awesome. And you spoke about forms and all that earlier, so I do want to address this at least for a fleeting moment because
Yeah, we're gonna do that. Let's put it on quick pause.
Oh, sure.
And we're gonna get back to that in part 2. Okay, back to part 2 here in a second. We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.